and purest deposit of a substance called diatomite. What is it? It's an accumulation of the fossilized remains of billions and billions of microscopic, one-cell plants related to the algae, plants that flourished here when much of what is now the California coastline was below sea level, sometime back around 15 million years ago. In air-conditioned power shovels, tractors, and trucks, men of the Johns Manville Corporation scoop out the diatomite and start it toward the processing plant several miles away. The air-conditioned cabs are part of a health and safety program in which $1 million has been expended for dust elimination alone. Truckloads of the diatomite are dumped at the top of a huge excavation called a glory hole. This leads down into a complex system of tunnels in which trains are waiting to be loaded by gravity. What's the diatomite used for? Well, it has a host of uses. It's tremendously porous, so it makes an excellent filter powder for clarifying liquids. As a filler, it's used as a component of such products as lacquers, paints, matches, plastics, paper, and insecticides. It's also an extremely effective insulation for furnaces and other high-temperature equipment. But before it can do all these things, it must be processed here. In addition to expensive protective equipment and strictly enforced safety practices, the company maintains a complete up-to-date clinic under the direction of a doctor who's a specialist in industrial hygiene. Examinations and medical advice are administered at regular intervals. Processing the diatomite begins in huge rotary kilns in which temperatures up to 2,000 degrees drive off moisture. The vapors driven off are in effect wet dust, but an installation called the rotoclone filters out the dust, allowing only harmless steam to be exhausted into the atmosphere. They aren't missing any bets in their campaign against air contamination. After further processing, the diatomite, or cellite, as it's called commercially, emerges as a fine, pure white powder, a sample of which is tested before it moves on to storage or packaging. 150,000 centuries, these silicous plants lay buried, finally to be extracted and put to the service of mankind. In the packing rooms, if it weren't for the filter masks, you'd never guess that some of the material handled is finer than the finest talc. Away it goes to factories everywhere. Even the floors are constantly kept clear of dust by means of a powerful vacuum cleaner designed by the firm's own technicians in order to eliminate hand sweeping. An outstanding example of the way industry guards the well-being of the men and women who turn out the raw materials and finished products that help maintain our unparalleled standard of living.
The reason we Americans can produce more goods in less time for higher wages than any other people in the world is because of our system of individual competitive enterprise. Year after year in this land of freedom, industry has increased its productive capacity by setting aside about half of its earnings in order to replace, expand, or rebuild its plant and equipment. This expansion has benefited all of us. In peace, by more jobs and better products. In defense, by providing all the necessary equipment to keep America the arsenal of freedom.
How does a relatively small auto parts company hold its own in one of the most competitive fields in all industry? That's what we asked these men of the Wallard Corporation of Lansing, Michigan, and their answer was ingenuity. Take the problem they're working on now. They have an order for several thousand automotive water pumps. If the order involved hundreds of thousands of units, they could tool up with all sorts of specialized equipment. But it isn't that kind of order. And to buy lots of new instruments would raise production costs so high, they wouldn't have won the contract. So they improvise, modifying equipment already on hand, without going overboard buying machines they'd have no use for a few weeks from now. Looks like a Rube Goldberg invention, but this pressure tester does the job it was built to do. Like any plant, of course, this one must have and does have a great many standard machine tools for performing a myriad of operations, like cold rolling bar steel. But there's scarcely a tool in the place, including this one, that hasn't been altered at one time or another to accommodate it to jobs somewhat different from the one for which it was intended. Now the rings must be heat treated to eliminate internal stress, and that used to mean sending them to special furnaces until the local geniuses devised furnaces that could be brought to the rings. They built them right here, accomplishing who knows how much of a saving in space, time, and equipment. Gradually, the metal rings are transformed into flywheels, progressing through a series of operations that may be fundamentally the same as those performed in any other plant of this kind, but are probably performed nowhere else in exactly the same way. Now, gear teeth will be cut in the perimeter of the wheels, again on a standard machine, but one equipped with a cutting head made in Wallard's own tool shop. In only the past generation or so, we've become the most mechanically adept nation on earth, a development directly attributable to the freedom of thought and action encouraged throughout industry, a freedom that springs from our constant search for improvements and from our refusal to accept the idea that there can be only one way of doing things.
Industry on Parade visits the Silver Spur Ranch in Cedar Valley, Texas, to call on a man named Alan Sears, a man who knew what kind of life he wanted and set about achieving it. Rancher Sears didn't build his career on Shetland ponies, nor cattle or oil either. 20 years ago, back in Houston, he started out with $6 and an idea for making a nutritious, tasty, low-calorie bread from a flour derived in part from cottonseed hulls. He called it Nutty Brown Bread, and was soon producing his unique flour for bakeries all over the country, licensed to bake and market the bread using Sears flour and recipe. Then, a few years ago, the organization pulled up stakes and resumed operations here on a ranch in the hill country, and here it has continued to flourish. Currently, widespread interest in low-starch diets has given new impetus to bakery goods made from what was once a discarded byproduct of the cotton industry. All has not been smooth sailing for the firm, though. During World War II, raw materials were largely cut off, so the company added pecan pralines to its line and was forced by demand to continue making this and other types of candy even after the flour mill got back into full operation. So here, with Mr. and Mrs. Sears in their office, we end the brief story that demonstrates again how one can still build the kind of career he wants, like running a flour mill on a ranch in the heart of Texas.
Fewer accidents are taking place in industry than ever before in history. It's a fact. Employees are safer on the job. Fewer accidents are the result of industry's effective accident prevention work in providing safe, healthful working conditions, safe tools, safe machines, and safe work methods. And employers all over the country continue to adopt sound, progressive safety practices and enlist employee cooperation to do their share in cutting down on industrial accidents.
Than the fastest operators.
Where is electronic research controlled by a rat trap?
Ever taken a boat ride through wet grass?
Industry on Parade, a brand new look at our America, produced each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
Troy, Ohio. As in many another U.S. town and city, there's lots of building going on around here these days. New homes, new schools, new shops, and the things that produce the income that makes them all possible, new factories. Among the craftsmen doing the building are the welders who fuse sheets, tubes, bars, and beams of metal into the strong permanent units to be found at the core of any modern structure. But have helped develop Troy in other ways too, for this is the home of Hobart Brothers, who manufactures welding equipment and sponsors of a remarkably well-equipped trade school specializing in the training of welders. Here from all over the country come both novices and men with experience who need a little brushing up. After the theory behind the various techniques has been explained and demonstrated by experts, the students try it out for themselves. In the course of a day, more welding is done here probably than in a dozen average factories. A lot of it is pretty crude at first, but as the days go on, it becomes more and more professional. Hours of practice bring skill to a peak and also create a scene that looks a great deal like Dante's Inferno. One difference is, here they have powerful blowers to draw off the smoke. They learn electric welding and gas welding, spot, stud, and submerged welding, and they're indoctrinated in the use of scientific methods of checking on their work, like industrial X-ray. It can uncover cracks of weak spots that wouldn't otherwise be found out until the weld parted. There's training, too, in allied fields, like the art of cutting with flame. The non-profit school is a notable contribution, not only to Troy, but to industries and individuals the country over. And there have been some other notable contributions, especially to the immediate community, through the C.C. Hobart Foundation. A big addition to the town's power plant, donated by the foundation. Lights for the local stadium, and the welding job on all steel work. The stadium is part of about as extensive a public recreation setup as you'll find in any city its size. The indoor arena, part of the setup, is another donation, in toto. Housing projects, too, with the homes sold at cost. Just mention a problem or need affecting this community, and you're sure to find some conscientious industrial neighbors named Hobart busy meeting it.
Today's frontiersman does not wear a coonskin cap or shoulder a hunting rifle. More likely, he's wearing a laboratory apron with a stirring rod. Today's pioneer, the scientist, finds new lands to explore in test tubes. His hunting is done with a microscope. The scientist and engineer, working with the businessman, tamed the wilderness with steamboats and railroads, provided harvesters to cut the prairie grain and feed a growing nation. Scientists harnessed the power of rivers, coal, and oil, and helped give Americans high-quality, mass-produced goods. Yes, today, America's new frontiers are in science.
Just a few of the machines in the 9-acre San Gabriel, California plant of Clary Multiplier Corporation, in which are produced the 1,700 parts that go into one compact little adding machine. On presses equipped with every imaginable sort of safety device, the dies come down, not on fingers, but on metal that must be cut and shaped into all the myriad parts for a business machine. The straps pull his arms out of the way when the press descends. Taken out of the heat-treating oven where 1,500 to 2,000 degree temperatures have conditioned the metal, pans full of parts are doused in cool oil to complete the treatment. Next, they're sprayed with a soundproofing coat, and sub-assembly begins. This is the camshaft, heart of the adding machine. Disregarding the talk about decreasing opportunities in America, Clary set out only 11 years ago to try its luck in a field extremely specialized and already involved in strong competition among a number of well-established makers of fine office equipment. Its continued growth has again proved that any field is wide open in American industry. The sub-assemblies are put together with some kibitzing by founder Hugh Clary, whose staff now numbers 1,500 men and women. The machines, without their covers, are tested under office conditions for 8 hours, a workout that would uncover even the most elusive bugs. In addition to the hand-powered models, the firm produces the sort of high-speed electric adding machines modern industry demands. You might think such speed is way beyond the requirements of any ordinary office worker, and so it is. But now they're learning how to hook up the mechanical mathematicians directly to Geiger counters, factory machines, and the like, so they can transform complex, rapid-fire readings of temperature, stress, voltage, or whatever into columns of printed figures. This electronic computer, long in development, is ready to go. And for that matter, so are the people of this youthful, vigorous organization.
General Electric's research laboratory at Schenectady, New York, one of the most modern labs anywhere. So why is an ordinary rat trap part of its equipment? Well, Dr. Harry Sharbaugh, studying the effects of electrical current on insulating materials, found that not even the most expensive apparatus could sweep across a series of electrical contacts any better. The rat trap is only one of dozens of homely objects put to good use here, side by side with fabulous lab equipment costing thousands of dollars. Recognize the familiar appliance here? It's an auto jack, used to test the strength of plastics. The lab's machine shop could have supplied any number of devices for applying pressure, but if a jack works, why bother the machine shop? Considering the complexity of problems they deal with, it's amazing how simple and direct is the thinking of the men and women in this house of science. Requiring a vertical agitator to stir liquids in a freezing bath, they just set a windshield wiper motor on end and hooked it up. Works like a charm. They refuse to be bound by tradition. Lab assistant Hurt, looking for a soft, lint-proof cloth for polishing transparent plates, found it at home. Then there's the case of Dr. Vincent Schaefer, the renowned weather scientist. To study the effects of rapid pressure changes on moisture, he attached to the mouth of a flask a flexible bottle that once held cosmetics. Pressure applied, a cloud forms. Pressure released, it disappears. Another of Dr. Schaefer's improvisations came from his need for an extremely wide-angle camera lens to photograph 120 degrees of sky. He filled a flask with oil, placed it between his camera and the window. Now he records 1/3 of the sky in a single picture, shot through a bottle of oil. Around here, there's no telling what you'll find being pressed into the service of science.
In America, thousands of true life success stories are being written every day. Here we have the opportunity to make of our lives whatever we care to make of them, and there is no limit. Men starting at the bottom have every opportunity to climb to the top. This constant movement of men upwards in the ranks of business is one reason why American industry has never stopped progressing. Someone is always carrying a new idea up the ladder. This in turn helps everyone, for always new ideas, constant improvements of methods and products mean higher living standards for all Americans.
Kermath Manufacturing Company, a Detroit jet factory. Not jet airplanes, jet boats. Does this look like a conventional marine engine? Well, that's what it is, a powerful marine engine. And this is a not so powerful one, only 5 horsepower. But here's the unit that transforms both of them into jet engines. It impels water with tremendous thrust through a nozzle, not only pushing the boat along, but steering it as well, thus eliminating propeller, drive shaft, stuffing boxes, and bearings. even the rudder. Run a boat equipped with hydrojet right up on shore and it doesn't matter. You just reverse the nozzle and she backs right off, washing away the sand and, you might say, digging its own channel. Since the nozzle projects only 3.5 inches below the bottom of the hull, and there's no rudder or screw, it romps right off into shallow, weed-filled waters. A heavy dew on the lawn's about all it needs. Industry on Parade cameraman Russ Carrier was most impressed by the lack of vibration, which at more than 20 miles an hour allowed him to take films much smoother than he could get from an automobile traveling the same speed. Fortunately, Russ wasn't aboard when they made this stop, or he'd still be diving for his camera. The nozzle is just reversed and the boat stops in its own length. Still, another unusual aspect of the hydrojet is the fact that all that water shooting out the stern can also be pumped through a hose to put out fires. Let's assume we're answering a fire alarm. There's no siren, but we really don't need one. Hail Columbia, call out the reserves. No, we don't need the reserves. Our one-man volunteer force is here with all the pumping power we require. There's a special attachment to hook up a hose, and while ordinarily it's used for pumping bilges, cleaning nets, or washing down the boat, in an emergency it can be used to help out fire-fraught landlubbers, for it throws out a stream of water at the rate of more than 600 gallons a minute. Fireboats in big port cities have been using the same engines for both propulsion and putting water on fires for more than 10 years. And now smaller communities and private citizens can do the same.